Hey everybody, how you doing today? I hope I'm broadcasting here. As always, I'm thinking I'm messing up because I always seem to mess up just prior to going live. It's like my computer changes all the time. So today I want to talk to you about whether or not Trudeau can extend his time in office by declaring an emergency, because I've got that comment quite a few times on my videos. So, hello, Lorraine. Yeah, so it looks like I'm broadcasting. So just before we get into it, just to allow a few people to join in on the stream here, I've lowered the resolution to hopefully bring my voice or bring my lips in sync with my voice. So if that's working, please comment below in the comments, not on the chat so much, because I don't know a way to retrieve. I'm a boomer. I don't know a way to retrieve or to save the chat, if there's even a possibility of that. But in the comments below, if you can comment whether the resolution is fine. I've lowered it to 780p or 720p so that I can hopefully sync my lips with my voice. I don't know if that's going to work. Let me know below, because I can't obviously do this separately when it's a live stream. So, so today I wanted to talk about a comment that I get on my videos every now and again, whether Trudeau can actually extend his time in office by declaring an emergency. And in fact, yes, he can. Will he? Won't he? I don't know, but yes, he can. This is a provision from the Constitution, and it is I'm not quite sure exactly. It just says provision number 4.1. I googled it. This is what came up. This is the Constitution Act of 1982. So this was brought in by Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And provision 4.1 says, no House of Commons and no Legislative Assembly shall continue for longer than 5 years from the date fixed for the return of the writs at a general election of its members. However, subsection 2, in time of real or apprehended war, invasion, insurrection, a House of Commons may be continued by Parliament, and a Legislative Assembly may be continued by the legislature beyond 5 years if such continuation is not opposed by the votes of more than 1/3 of the members of the House of Commons or the Legislative Assembly, as the case may be. So that is the Constitution. So that is the ultimate law. Now, that actually does cause a bit of concern, because it's not just the war, it's the possibility of war, whether it's real or whether he believes it's real. And or insurrection. Now, one could argue that during the trucker protest, he invoked the Emergencies Act because he considered it to be an emergency, but did he consider it to be an insurrection? So that's, a big question. With everything that's going on in the world today, I think that it is possible that he would do that. I used to think that, well, no, nobody would do that. I mean, it's Canada, right? It's a free country. I'm not sure. I'm not sure just how free we are anymore under Trudeau. And I think 2022 really brought that to the forefront of our minds because of what he did during that peaceful protest that happened in Ottawa and what he did. The fact that he could go as far as he did, that he could seize bank accounts, that he could really put the Constitution aside at will, and then start seizing our property. We have the right to against unlawful search and seizure. That was totally sidetracked for the trucker protest because of the Emergencies Act. He did that. They did that even before that. That when people were bringing diesel into the protest area, the police started seizing the diesel. The police started seizing things that they had no right to seize. Now, this happens all the time in Canada. Now, I know I've said this like probably 100 times. I'm a former police officer, but my belief when I was a police officer was my first duty was to the Canadian citizens, to preserve their rights, to fight for their rights. And a secondary role was to enforce the law. And you would always hope that the law was a just law. But as a police officer, you do have the authority to use discretion. So if the law is not just, you actually do have the right to refuse to enforce that law. Now, are there consequences in that? Could you be held liable under a police act? Yes, you could. So the Trudeau won, so Pierre Elliott Trudeau, he invoked the War Measures Act in the 1970s. First time it had ever been done in time of peace. I think the first time it was ever done, period. But I stand corrected on that if I am wrong. But he suspended basically human rights all across Canada because of incidents that were happening in Quebec. And then that was judged basically to be wrong, unlawful, an abuse of power. So he created the Emergency Measures Act. And then lo and behold, his son is the only one in history who's ever invoked the Emergency Measures Act. And what they did there was they suspended your constitutional rights. And I would add that they suspended the constitutional rights prior to even invoking those, because they started seizing personal property. And it was on the grounds of, well, it may be used in a criminal offense. And the criminal offense, though, was mischief. Now, mischief, it doesn't sound too serious. Sometimes it is serious, sometimes it isn't. But it's basically, there's different forms of mischief. There's public mischief, that's lying to the police to cause an investigation to occur, or lying about somebody to cause an investigation to occur. That could also be construed as obstruction, but mischief, public mischief, falls in there. There's also mischief to property. So you vandalize something, that's vandalism. And then there's mischief by interfering with the lawful enjoyment of property. And that's essentially what the participants in the trucker convoy were charged with. So it's not an overly, I would say that on seriousness of offenses, it's at best a mid-level offense during at the worst possible set of circumstances. At best, a mid-level offense, but normally I would classify it as being kind of a low-level offense, low to mid-level offense. Obviously, you don't want your property vandalized, but when you're interfering with the lawful enjoyment of property, what we used to use that for sometimes was when people had loud, out of control parties, and the neighbors were couldn't sleep, or they couldn't enjoy their property, something like that. And that's fairly low level. It's and yeah, you could get a search warrant and seize like stereo equipment and stuff like that. Very rarely done. Very rarely done. You have to be very careful when you enforce laws like that, because you start trampling on people's rights. It's a balancing act. It really is. And when you consider that Tamara Lich has now had the longest criminal trial for mischief in the history of Canada, and it's for interfering with the public enjoyment of property, something is totally out of whack here. So bringing that back to what we're talking about tonight, would Justin Trudeau use something like that to extend his time in power? And as we saw from provision 4, sub 2 of the Constitution, the elections portion of the Constitution, he could. And it doesn't even have to be, it doesn't have to be a real war, although one could argue that it seems like we're getting closer and closer to a real war, and that's very worrisome. And it doesn't even have to be, it doesn't have to be a world war. It doesn't have to be, an international conflict, because more and more we're seeing a lot of things happening on Canadian soil. And I'm speaking, and I know I've done a ton of videos on this already, so I hope I'm not boring anybody, but when you see when you see what's happening with all of these protests, and all over Canada, essentially the pro-terror protests, I like to call them. They say pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine. They're pro-terror protests, in my view, because they're calling for actual violence, and they're calling for essentially the extermination of a population, of a religion, and they're very anti-Semitic. And now they have these bomb threats, and I did a video on that. Didn't get much traction today. I knew it probably wouldn't, because my videos on the synagogue, the violence towards synagogues, never seems to get a lot of traction. Neither here nor there, but it's a very important topic. Reason being is, it doesn't matter what religion you are. I'm Catholic. Not that matters. I'm not a very good Catholic, but I'm Catholic. And you see the violence towards the Catholics all the time. You see churches being burnt, and now you see synagogues being burnt. You see people shooting up synagogues, and now you have bomb threats. And as I said in my video this morning, that is probably a hoax, a sick hoax, but it could be more. And it's something that we really need to take serious, because it is an escalation. And the fact that I hadn't seen any news releases on it, of course I haven't checked since I did the video, it is a bit concerning, because it is kind of important and kind of relevant in today. So can Trudeau use that? And I'll bring it up again, just in case you're just joining in. But can Trudeau use that as an excuse to extend his time in power? And the answer is, he actually could. I don't know if he would, but he actually could use that to extend his time in power. And that is a very scary prospect. It's scary. I think it should be scary for everyone, because, first off, 70% plus people in Canada do not want him in power. They want to get rid of him. They want an election, and they want him out of power. So it's a real problem if he could use something like that, which he could technically because of this act, and in the British North American Act prior to that, there was provisions for that as well. So we know that he does have the legislative ability to do that. The question is, would he? And I think that because of what we saw with the trucker protest, I think he would. Honestly, I think he would. Not necessarily in the exact environment that we find ourselves in today. It would have to maybe escalate, but is it something that he might manufacture himself? Maybe that's why he's allowing these protests, these pro-terror protests, to go on as long as he has. Maybe he's not taking a hard stance against mass immigration from unvetted immigration. Maybe he wants to create all this division. It's part of the, and I know it's, I've said this before, and people probably think it's hyperbolic, but it is part of the Marxist philosophy, and to create division, to create chaos. And he seems to be very good at that. About the only thing he's good at is creating division and chaos throughout his time in power. He only got one, he was only elected with the popular vote once. His other two elections, he lost the popular vote. So I don't trust anything he does. I don't think he's competent. And because of what we've seen, I don't have faith that he won't do something like that. So when he's bringing all these people in, and he's not, and we don't have the housing for him, and he's giving them $224 a day living expenses, tax-free. That is tax-free. That's more than most people make in a year when you consider it's tax-free, okay? It's more than what an entry-level constable in the RCMP makes when you consider that it's tax-free, or it's close to what they make. I'm not sure exactly what they make anymore. I think they make a little bit more because they did have some increases after I left. So you have to consider that he's doing almost everything he can to disrupt Canada. Yeah, it's per day. It's $224 per day that they give an adult. Rock Girl was just inquiring about this. Yeah, I did a video on this. $224 a day. That if you're if you came in as an asylum seeker, which and I think there's a very high percentage of asylum seekers who eventually get denied. Now, whether or not they're actually deported, I don't know, because our justice system is completely wrecked, and it's been wrecked. And I was so frustrated with it when I was in, and when I joined the force, it was as a regular member in 1987, and I had been a special constable in 1985. So, and then in between there, I worked for Revenue Canada in customs and excise. So it wasn't, it was like Canadian Border Services. So, Rock Girl says that's a lot more than she's surviving on. It's true. It is true. It's absolutely true that people today survive on a lot less than what they're giving people who are coming here as asylum seekers, most of whom don't even qualify. What that does to the rest of us, and I've said this before as well. My wife is an immigrant. She came here legally. She played by the rules. She got her, permanent residency and then her citizenship. There's a bit of a funny story about her getting how she got sworn in, but she got her citizenship the right way, the legal way. She came here the legal way, and but now, if you just jump the border, you come here and you say the right words, I'm seeking asylum, and they give you a check for $224 a day living expenses. You know, you can get a decent hotel room and pay all of your food on that amount of money. And if there's two adults in your family, I'm not sure if they have a different rate for that, but think about that. You know, that's $448 a day per family. And there's a lot of people who don't make that much money take home, and that's take home. So is he kind of feeding into this this feeling of resentment and trying to drive a wedge between us? I think that he's doing that, because normally Canadians are, in my opinion and in my experience, we're very accommodating people, and we're very accepting of, you know, of people, and but he's trying to drive a wedge between us. And when we see that when we watch these protests, right? We see the pro-Hamas, pro-terror protests, and a lot of them aren't from Palestine. A lot of them are homegrown Canadian jerks, and who are just out to cause problems. They're Marxists, and a lot of them are being funded by Marxist organizations, funded by international Marxists like George Soros and stuff. He's funding a lot of this stuff. And they keep on calling for the extermination of Israel. And that's essentially what the river to the sea means. They want to get rid of Israel, and they want to get rid of the Jews. And they're not going to stop there. The philosophy that they live by is that they want to take over the world as far as the dominant religion, or the only religion, or the only belief. And they even fight amongst themselves. There's different sects within Islam that just hate each other, and that they're trying to exterminate each other. And not that I have anything against Islam per se. I know Muslims who are great people. I worked with some when I was in the RCMP. It's not that. It's our government's response to it, because there's radicals in every religion, in every group of people, in every demographic. But when you start pandering to them, you start driving a wedge between the rest of us. So what could happen there? Well, I think he may actually want some kind of civil unrest, because it seems to me like he's going down this Marxist rabbit hole, if he's not already all the way into it. And I think he probably is all the way into it. And he wants to use that as an excuse to take over and become some sort of a global government with the WEF and the UN and, the EU is, of course, that's regional, but I think that's kind of part of the problem. It's a government on top of a government. We've got too much government. We don't need other levels of government. But it seems to be this globalist Marxist movement. And how do you get there? Well, a lot of it is achieved through unrest. And he's not doing anything to stop it. How much is he doing to promote it? I think he's doing a lot to promote it. Is it intentional? I think it's intentional. but that's just an opinion. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I think it is. I think he's intentionally trying to drive wedges between us. And as we've seen with this provision of the Constitution, he can stay in power. He can extend his power if he does that. Now, I don't think that he's got to convince 2/3 of the Parliament to vote for it, but who knows if he won't try something devious and underhanded to subvert that. I don't know. The provision is there. Will he try it? I don't know. I suspect that he's, with the way he's going, he's maybe trying to divide us to the point where he can use that as an excuse. Will it be successful? Again, I don't know, but I wouldn't put anything past him. And if it was prior to 2022, I would probably say, no, there's no chance of that, because we live in, a civilized, rule-based, semi-democracy, a constitutional democracy. But after 2022, I can't say that really that really applies anymore, because he and his father have both proven that they're willing to suspend people's rights, and they're willing to suspend the law. And just to go off on a bit of a tangent here, that sort of unrelated, but kind of sort of is as a former police officer, even when I was in the force, I thought that there were certain areas we didn't have enough power and other areas we had too much power. And one of the areas we had too much power was in civil forfeiture. And I know a lot of police officers are probably going to disagree with me here, but civil forfeiture, in my opinion, is very, very dangerous. It's a slippery slope, very dangerous to go down, because while it makes sense in a lot of circumstances, like if somebody is speeding down the highway in a supercar and they're racing with other supercars and they're putting people's lives in danger, it makes sense to seize their vehicle. But if somebody shows up at an airport and they have a few $1,000s cash, should that give the police the right to seize that cash? Well, in the United States, they've been doing that. And in Canada, they've been doing that. And it's called Operation Pipeline. Now, what they do, like if you're driving down the road, let's say you only deal with cash, highly unlikely, but let's say you only deal with cash and you're saving up money to buy a car, and you want to deal cash for whatever reason. You don't trust the banks, you don't trust anybody, you're only dealing with cash, and you get pulled over. You've got this cash in your car to buy, or cash in your vehicle to buy another vehicle, and it's a substantial amount of money. Maybe it's a used car, you're buying it for 10 grand or whatever. Well, technically, the police can seize that money. I think that's very dangerous, because you then have to prove that where that money came from. That is completely opposite to our system of justice. Instead of the police or the government proving that you did something wrong, you, due to civil forfeiture laws, have to prove where that money came from. Now, in a lot of ways, in a lot of circumstances, that sounds like a good idea when you're dealing with a known drug dealer, but it's a very slippery slope, because you could be just this guy who only deals in cash. And there was this story on the news. I don't recall which news agency did this, but he was a guy, I think from one part of the States. I think it was from Texas, and he was going to another state to buy a tow truck, and it was a used tow truck, and the guy he was buying it from would only accept cash. So he took cash with him. He got profiled illegally at the airport and searched, and the police took his cash. And it took him months and months and months to get that cash back. That happens in Canada as well. So he had a legitimate reason for having cash. And I don't know how much he had, but it was well in excess of $10,000. And he had it confiscated. And that is one of the reasons why I think that the civil forfeiture is very dangerous. And I bring that up, and I'm bringing it back to the topic tonight, is because we need to really be careful what we allow the police to do. And as a former police officer, I can tell you that there are certain areas that we don't have hardly any power at all, that we should have more. But there's a lot of areas that, because of lawyers and whatnot and different workarounds, that we actually have too much power. Okay, if we should have to demonstrate that it is illegally gotten gains, and instead of the other way around. So Trudeau has all of these powers, and he seems to be using them more and more to divide us. Will that result in some sort of uprising or some sort of perceived uprising? Because as we've seen, again, with this provision, it doesn't have to be real. It could be, apprehended, I don't know. I don't like the way they've used that. It could be perceived war, or like an apparent war, something that he thinks might happen, like a civil war. But it doesn't even have to be war. It could be an insurrection. Well, look what happened in the States on January 6th, 2021. That wasn't really an insurrection, but they're calling it an insurrection. Okay, that was at best a trespass and mischief to property, at best. And they call it an insurrection to elevate it. Well, could Trudeau do the same to try and maintain power? Okay, I don't know, but I really wonder. I really wonder if he would try. I hope he wouldn't, but that's. Things have changed so much since in the last 10 years. It's unbelievable. So that's my little rant. I'm just going to go through the chat here and see if there's any. You know what? If there's anything you want to talk about, just put it in the chat and we'll go through it. So Darius believes that Justin and Jagmeet will team up. I think they've already teamed up. Will they team up more officially? I don't know. I think that I have a feeling that come March of 2025 that Jagmeet's going to say, "Hey, I've got my $2.3 million dollar pension. I'm all in for calling it quits with this coalition." But who knows? I could be wrong about that. I think it's a little bit late at that point because, at that point there's only 8 months left. But whatever. War Measures Act jigged for convenience. That's exactly what the Emergency Measures Act was. Okay. Yeah, it is. Maria, I'm not sure. I've got so much Japanese in me right now that is pronounced differently in Japanese. But anyways, regardless, over $80,000 per year. I think I worked it out, and it came to around $77,000. But when you, I could be wrong about that. I'd have to do the calculations again. But when you factor in that it's tax free, yeah, it's in excess of $80,000 in real money. Brad says sarcastically, I know, we need to give them that money. How else are they going to find the time to protest if they have to get a job? True, very true. But then again, do we want them to get a job? We don't even want them to be here, honestly, because now they're taking jobs away from Canadians. And Trudeau is under fire right now from the UN, for modern day slavery. Basically, he's allowing modern day slavery with what he's doing. God help Canada if Trudeau extends. Thank you, Mary, for that. It's true, very true, that Canada is in for it. But I don't know, if he does go this route, I'm not sure that peaceful Canadians will be able to control themselves. And I don't want to get to a level where his fantasies of insurrection come true. But I think it could possibly happen. Mary again says Trudeau divide and conquer, which is exactly what the Communist Manifesto is all about. Divide and conquer. It's right there. Doug says Conservatives have 119 seats. 112 would be a third. So Conservatives can put an end to that. And I still have faith in the Conservative Party for now. I've always voted Conservative. I'm not one of these YouTubers to say, yeah, I voted once for Liberals and now I'm Conservative. I've always been Conservative, even when they haven't been good for me. They've been good for the country. And what I mean by that is when Harper was in the government, he screwed over the RCMP personnel really badly. He screwed over a lot of people, but the RCMP personnel he screwed over very, very badly. We had agreed to a wage increase which was reasonable, and he just put an ixnay to that. And even though he did that, and I just hated him for it, I realized he was the best choice for the country. Okay, so sometimes you have to put your personal goals or your what's good for you aside for the betterment of the country. And I know, and that's hard to do. It's very hard to do. But always look at that. Sheila says, "Who's in Parliament or Senate can prove he's unfit?" I think it's covered. Part of your comment is covered here. I don't know. I don't think we have a provision for that in Canada. It's not like the US where they have the 25th Amendment. We have to have a non-confidence vote. And with the makeup of Parliament right now, that'll never pass because Jagmeet, until he gets his pension, won't support it. So, yeah, we can't prove that he is unfit, even though most of us believe that he is unfit. So, it would be great if we had more provisions like that, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't. I think that a lot of times the U.S. system, which has a lot of flaws, there's a lot of points in it that are somewhat better. I like Parliament, and I like question period, although it's more entertaining than productive. I'll put it that way. But it does have, but you do get an opportunity for the opposition parties to question the government, put them on the spot. Now, if the party in power had any integrity, they would actually answer questions, and there should be a rule that they actually answer questions. But of course, who would enforce that? Because they're the party in power. I like that about our system. I like our committees a little bit better than the committees in the States, although watching the committees in the States is very entertaining, especially when you see John Kennedy from Louisiana or Ted Cruz from Texas. They're entertaining. But as far as being productive is concerned, I think our committee system is probably a little bit better. But we need a system to get rid of the deadwood like Trudeau, so that he can't pull crap like this, it's possible he might try. So, hello, Pat from Alberta, Central Alberta. What part of Central Alberta? Are you talking Red Deer? So, Brad, I'm voting Conservative. However, if they get a massive majority, we better start praying that they are all saints. Well, this is true, but I don't like minority governments. And one of the reasons why I don't like minority governments is coalitions that, like what happened in France. So majorities, I think, are always good. I'm out of sync right now. You say that, okay, so resolution's fine. Sync was better before you made the changes. Out of sync right now. Well, that sucks, because I lowered the resolution. Now this, I have to run it through my computer, and I have an old computer when I'm going live. So that's my concern here is I don't think I'm going to be able to solve the sync problem. But it could be also on the receiving end too. I'm not sure about that. But I know that I can improve the quality of my recorded videos by doing it separately and syncing them up together. But the live streams, I don't know what I can do there. If anybody has any suggestions, everybody knows this technology stuff better than this boomer does. Put it in the comments below, because as I said before, I don't think I can, I don't know how to retrieve chat after the live stream ends. But if you have any suggestions, put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it. Maybe I can get all this stuff sorted out. So as far as Brad's comments about voting Conservative, but if they get a massive majority, we might be in for it. We always have a little bit of, there's always a little bit of a danger with that, with any majority, massive or not, because there's nobody who keeps a check on them. So that's one of those things. It's just I just have to take a little bit of homemade iced tea, but watered down by ice, no sugar. There's always a bit of a problem with that. Personally, I think that our whole structure in Canada sucks, because if you compare it to other countries, we're more like Britain than we are like the US as far as obviously our democracy is concerned, but culturally we're more like the US than we are like Britain as far as our culture is concerned. And that can be a good thing, and it could be a bad thing. What I find that I like about the US is power is more decentralized. Although we all know about the federal government in the US and all the how powerful the president is and all that kind of stuff. But in actual fact, because of their state system, states are far more powerful than provinces are. and that I think is a benefit to people because they have more localized control, more localized concerns. So and they have more variety of what they can do. So like if I don't like the way the federal law is in Canada, I can't just move to another province to get around that. But let's say I'm in California and I'm pro-life. I could move to Texas. But if I'm in Texas and I'm pro-choice, well, I could move to California, you know. Or if I'm living in New York and I'm a Second Amendment advocate, I could move to Tennessee. But if I'm in Tennessee and I think that there's too many guns, I could move to New York. I mean, those are that's kind of the benefit of residing in a country in their system, in their states, because their states have a lot more power. Also, they have a county system. We used to have counties in British Columbia. They still have counties in some provinces. We just essentially renamed them as opposed to getting rid of them. But our counties and our municipal and regional districts, they have no real power. They're just an administrative the regional districts are administrative body of the provincial government, whereas the municipal districts are kind of like a city. Whereas in the U.S., I think that there's more local authority as well. So one of the things that I find really disturbing in Canada is where the power is located and focused. So we have this government, this central government that has no real has all this authority, but not a lot of power because they're very ineffective. Because we don't have a lot of population and whatnot. But they have all the authority over us. The provinces, it's like, and I know that this is oversimplifying it, but it's like the provinces work for the federal government, whereas the federal government in the U.S. kind of supplements the states. It's kind of opposite. In reality, it doesn't really work like that, but to give an oversimplified, kind of view of that world is I would like to see our provinces have a little bit more independence and stuff. So then Brad comes up with, if the notwithstanding clause was removed from the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we would have more legal protections from the government. That's true. Now, there are some issues with that because the interpretation of the Charter of Rights by our overly liberal courts have really kind of watered down our rights and given sometimes too much rights to people who don't deserve them, and by that I mean criminals. And Pierre Poilievre, and this is one thing I really hate about the Liberals and the NDP is they twist everything, and so many people actually believe them. They're kind of like the Democrats in the States, where they say that Poilievre would just throw out the Constitution. He never said that. He said one thing specifically is that he would use the notwithstanding clause to keep people who needed to be kept in jail, like first-degree murderers and whatnot. So he had a very limited example of how he would use the notwithstanding clause. Without that, he wouldn't be able to use that and to make sure that people are kept in jail who needed to be kept in jail. So it's a double-edged sword. Like, do I like the notwithstanding clause? It doesn't seem like a very reasonable thing to have. But then when you have courts that interpret the law a certain way, then it might become necessary. So, for example, Another example of that is in the United States, the meaning and the purpose of what the law was supposed to be and how the Constitution can be interpreted is based on the founders' interpretation, what they meant to do. But in Canada, we don't have that. It's black letter law as interpreted by the courts and precedents. So whereas in the U.S. Constitution, they can consider what the founders wanted and what the founders meant. But in Canada, we don't really have that option. Now, that interpretation may have changed over time. That was back in my university days that I learned that from a law professor. And maybe that was just his interpretation, but it makes a lot of sense because we don't hear a lot of that. And really, who really wants to live by Pierre Trudeau's interpretation of what the Constitution should have been anyway? Only communists really want that. So yeah, should the notwithstanding clause be removed from a Constitution, from our Charter of Rights and Freedoms? I think that, on a purely academic interpretation, I think that it should be. From a practical sense, I think that it should be. But then again, when you balance that against our overly liberal courts, there's a bit of a problem there because they interpret the Constitution and your rights in a very, very bizarre way. And I'll give you an example of this. And I know a lot of people have referred to this and have blamed the RCMP for screwing up an investigation, but I see it a little differently. In this particular case, in this one particular case, it was a case where there was a couple of fanatics who were planning on placing a bomb either outside or possibly inside the BC legislature. And they were infiltrated by a UC undercover operator of the RCMP. And the judge ruled that these guys were entrapped. But I listened to the tape, the surveillance tape, and I didn't see it that way. The RCMP officer was giving them every opportunity to back out of it, to not complete this conspiracy, and every opportunity, unless there was something else that wasn't broadcast, and that's quite possible. It's quite possible that what was broadcast was not what the judge made his decision on. But if his decision was made on that wiretap, or not wiretap, but that one-party consent recorded evidence, that wasn't entrapment. Okay, that wasn't entrapment. The judge made, in my view, a grave error. And I'm allowed to criticize judges because I'm not a police officer anymore. And I think most judges are out to lunch. And, for example, if our judges had any common sense, they would rule that the order in council making so many firearms prohibited was unjust on many, many grounds. But they don't. They just go with the party line and they allow the abuse of power. So judges are not, in my mind, overly trustworthy. They're not people that we give them far too much credit for being intelligent. It's like our politicians. We give them credit for being intelligent. No, they weren't. Most of them are not intelligent. There's a few who are. Most of them are just, they have the ability to get people to like them and vote for them, and that's it. And they have no special skills. So Yeah. Yeah, Brad says, yeah, the newspaper articles made it sound like it was a Mr. Big operation that was entrapment. That's what I get from reading the newspaper. That's what the judge ruled. And if I hadn't heard the audio of that apparently the judge based his decision on, if I hadn't heard that article, maybe I would have bought into that too. But having heard that audio, I think that, and if you can get it, listen to it. And I could be wrong. Maybe I missed something. Maybe there was something else in the audio that was cut off that I didn't hear. But from what I heard, it was a Mr. Big operation, but it was that they were trying to get these guys or they're giving these guys an out. They were allowing them to say, no, we don't want to do this. Are you sure you want to do this? Is this really what you want to do? We can back out of this. That was kind of the gist I was getting from that audio. And that's really not entrapment. I mean, it and entrapment is a funny thing, because, it's almost like we play the, what happens in the news over and over and over again, and in the on TV about entrapment. Entrapment doesn't really work like that. To be entrapment, you have to basically be pushing somebody towards doing a crime that they would not have done otherwise. Okay, now that may have changed. They may have watered that down since I've left, but that was always what it was meant to be. So you can't push somebody to do something they wouldn't have done otherwise. You can't entice them. You can't bring them into an operation. You can't say, hey, I want to go and do this. Do you want to do this? That would be entrapment. But if it's like, hey, so you're looking to do this and you want to get me involved? Are you sure? Are you really sure you want to do this? That's not entrapment. That's getting them to commit to what they have already committed to. They're getting to commit to it on tape. And that's what I saw. That's what I heard. But again, I could be wrong. So, and I bring that up only to demonstrate that judges are not necessarily the brightest people in the world, and a lot of times it's because they overthink a problem or a situation. They got all this legalese going on. So anyway, that's a little bit of a rant, a little bit of off topic. I think I've kind of gone through everything that I can on this provision. Can he, will he, could he extend his time and power? I don't think he will be able to, but will he try? I don't know. But thanks for tuning in this evening. I think we've had a pretty good conversation back and forth. Someday I'd like to be able to do this with less glitches and maybe have a Q&A type of thing going on. But if there's any suggestions to how to improve the stream, either technically or content-wise, if you can put it in the comments below, because as I said before, I don't know how to keep these chats or to recover these chats. So any suggestions, put them in the comments. And I read every comment, try to respond to most of them. Quite frankly, there's some that I don't respond to because I'm not quite sure what people are saying. They're a little bit vague, but I do read them all. I do read them all, even the hidden ones that YouTube won't let me unhide. So thanks for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you next week, and try to engage next week, and also in the in my other videos. That would be great. And I hope you guys have a great day, great evening.